Welcome to City Cinematheque, where the art and pleasure of the movies are the subject of serious discussion. I'm your host, Jerry Carlson, and I teach film studies at the City College of the City University of New York. Today, it's our pleasure to present the 1961 Argentine film, Hand in the Trap, directed by Leopoldo Torre Nilsson and written by Beatriz Guido. This film won the International Critics Prize at the Cannes Film Festival, and in many ways serves as an example of the highest possible standards of Latin American filmmaking. Indeed, in a Time magazine article in the early 1960s, Torre Nilsson was ranked with Kurosawa, Truffaut, Sajid Rai, Ingmar Bergman as one of the great filmmakers of the world. So this is one of our opportunities to rediscover his work and to consider his contribution to Latin American filmmaking. Now, take this opportunity to enjoy the perhaps a little bit too forgotten but still remarkable Hand in the Trap.
Oh.
Welcome back to City Cinematheque. Hope you've enjoyed this chance for what I think is a rather rare screening of a very important film that's now almost 40 years old, Hand in the Trap. It's a pleasure today to have with us an expert on modern Latin American narrative, who happens to herself be Argentine and a professor at Barnard College, Flora Sheminovich, returning here to City Cinematheque. Always a pleasure to have you here.
Welcome, welcome. It's always my pleasure to be here.
Well, let's start with this epoch itself. Let's do a little bit of just a background of what sort of condition Argentina is in the late 50s and early 60s. Mm-hmm. Who's running the country, and what's the status of the film industry at this particular time?
Well, Argentina just ended the dictatorship of Juan Perón, mm-hmm. and was a populist movement, during his. Actually, Hollywood was not a great influence in Argentina because Perón was against anything that had to do with the United States. Was really interesting. So mainly, I would say that what we got was European influence, in Argentina. It's interesting that everything that came from the United States had to be somehow, we struggled to have jazz records, and we couldn't see very much, the Hollywood films. But so then I would say that the European influence was great, and here, you have Torre Nilsson, that in Europe, the neorealism, was so right. influential, and in Rome, there was that interesting the school in Rome where that Garcia Marquez and Gutierrez Alea and Fernando Birri, an Argentinian, were there, and they brought that influence to the neorealism, to America, and of course Buñuel with Los Olvidados. I should not forget, Buñuel.
Well, no, that's very interesting because I think for some viewers who might have tuned in, shall we say, 10 minutes or 15 minutes into this film,
yes.
they might have some difficulty figuring out where the film was set, particularly if they didn't happen to know, to happen to have the clues of the language or whatever. You could almost say, well, wait a minute, is this some undiscovered Mediterranean country?
That's right.
And the film very much has the feel of a post-Italian neorealist with some of the social critique of La Dolce Vita, but more of an Antonioni about it.
Very much, Antonioni, and it's interesting for me to see this film from the last century.
We worked together in the last century, didn't we?
Century, yes.
We last worked together in the last century.
Because, this Torre Nilsson, he belonged to that expression, the school of expressionism, and he never really cared so much about, social realism, to depict the literature of the society. But it's interesting, when I see it now, I see a lot of criticism of the society, of the bourgeois society that Antonioni also does. And but I think, what happened to Torre Nilsson, and, I'm going to talk a little bit about his relationship with Beatriz Guido, his wife also.
Yeah, let's do that. But before we talk about his relationship with his wife, I think it's important to understand that he's somebody who was raised in the film industry, that Argentina had a studio system
Well, they didn't do so well after the war, and even during Perón, who tried to help, they didn't do so well. I mean,
Right.
they had it was the aftermath of the war still, but in '57 there was a law that helped the film industry with 50% of the expenses. So here you have somebody like Torre Nilsson and then Fernando Ayala. Torre Nilsson decided, to have his own company called Angel. It's funny, and the distribution, and he could do practically everything he wanted to do.
Right.
So he was l'auteur, in the European way. So he really, had the money to fund all these films that he was doing, but they were very European. And many people consider them elite. It wasn't something that could get to all the masses. I really, when you say now, I mean, people looking at this and they would say, "What is this? Latin America?"
But that you bring up a very interesting point. Is
Yes.
that in a quest for identity as filmmakers, different generations of Latin American filmmakers, and indeed different generations or different individuals within the Argentine film industry, have had very different conceptions of what their art should be doing.
That's
and
right.
and who it should be addressing. So only a few years after this, people like Octavio Getino and Pino Solanas, Fernando
Yes,
Pino Solanas,
yes.
are going to try to create a very strongly radical but populist
That's
cinema
right.
as well, which is this clearly this film we've just seen fits into a mold of a European, or more broadly a kind of global art cinema.
That's right. If you want, to make connections, I would, it's the Gothic style, Baroque style, Antonioni style, and Edgar Allan Poe's. There's something very strange, and you really have to imagine. Unless, looking at it now, I feel that there is a lot of repression. I mean, that repression never left our country and many other countries.
Well,
so the repression that it's, there, but it's a very abstract and metaphoric, so it's not very easy, to convey.
Well, let's come back to that as a formal quality of the film, that is, of the storytelling and of the way the
Yes.
style is used. But let's get to what you wanted to bring up a little bit earlier, and that is the person whom I've mentioned as really the fundamental co-creator of this work, and that's Beatriz Guido. Let's just talk about, first of all, who she was, because it's very, very important. And there's several things, facts about her life that are very important. So who is Beatriz Guido, and why should we know who she is now?
Yes, it's very interesting because I grew up in a country that where the women were very good writers. First of all, we had Victoria Ocampo, who was director of a very important magazine in Buenos Aires Sur. And all these women wrote for her. Silvina Bullrich, Silvina Ocampo, and Beatriz Guido. So as I was growing up, I mean, the short stories were there in the magazine, and I was so familiar with them. And then she wrote a novel, The House of the Angel, that became, a bestseller, Beatriz Guido. So this marriage was a good marriage because
Well, I should say that if our audience doesn't know, that Leopoldo Torre Nilsson and Beatriz Guido were man and wife.
That's right.
For a very long
Yeah.
time. They've now both passed away.
Yes.
But in fact, their two sons both continue the
That's
tradition
right.
of working in the
continue the
Argentine
tradition.
film
But
industry.
she wrote the scripts, first, there were the novels. She had another book called The End of the Party, a very famous one at the time also, and a collection of short stories, very Gothic in style. When I love modernism, I think I mentioned that to you, and so, many of these writers were, Borges, style. The main difference that I would say, between these women and Beatriz Guido and other writers is that there isn't so much humor. There is irony,
Right.
but not humor. And I love humor. I think Buñuel is a representative of a lot of humor, and so is Borges. So there is a little bit difference, but they are more Gothic in style, more Edgar Allan Poe. They love fantastic literature, and the fantastic literature runs through the blood of Argentinian literature of the time.
Well, I want to follow that line, and that'll take us into the film itself, and how the structure and the form of the film serve as a commentary upon Argentine society, the Argentine bourgeoisie. But I think it's worth just stopping for a second to give credit to the fact that this is a remarkable partnership. That is, we don't really have, that I know of such a lengthy partnership of an arguably major director and a screenwriter such as Beatriz Guido, in which essentially, although she may have shunned the term or would never even consider the term feminist writer, this is strongly, her writing is strongly an analysis of woman's place in a particular society.
Absolutely.
And the mechanisms of this.
And you will see repeatedly, I think I did with you once Summer Skin, remember?
Yes, absolutely.
And it runs, this problem of, women in the society, the rigidity of norms in society. And I also, it's interesting, but when I saw this film again, I thought of Lorca so much, and Bernarda Alba. In fact, there is a line in this film that, the aunt says, my sister died, in United States married, and the end of Bernarda Alba is, my daughter died a virgin. So it's exactly the same reproduction of repression that Lorca wanted.
Well, absolutely. And that, one of the things that structures this film that we don't know for a while, that the film holds back from us, is that the film really has a cyclic structure, that it shows how certain patterns develop, and those are patterns of entrapment. The hand in the trap. But the hand doesn't know it's going in.
Augustine, do you know that? San Augustine, there is a fragment in San Augustine that says that who puts a hand in the trap has to have, is condemned to have the trap always, with him. He has to carry the trap with him all the time.
Well, and that's another one of the, how to put it, modernist features of this film, that there are phrases in the film, the title itself, a metaphoric title, but that the informed viewer should know the implications of the title in a way that the character cannot know the implications of the title. Or
but we do.
But yes, or another way in which the people in the town don't recognize, or some people don't recognize, that the letters coming from America come from the town of Alcatraz.
I thought that was very ironic, looking at it now. I don't know what people in Argentina thought at the time. But for me, having seen Alcatraz, there is something in ruins. Recently in San Francisco, I said, somebody, there is no way that somebody can be happily married in Alcatraz.
Well, no, and I think that's, I think it's ironic for anybody watching the film. It's meant as such that we're supposed to, the wiser viewers, the people with the higher knowledge, are supposed to go, don't they understand this is an impossible letter? There's no town of Alcatraz. It's a rock in San Francisco Bay.
That's right.
That's a prison.
A prison.
Right.
There's a prison that you see from San Francisco.
Right. So she can't. There's no pharmacy there that carries all the.
I think that's a way of playing with context. I think his play. I don't think people knew. I think they knew about Alcatraz, being a prison, but I wouldn't know if they knew so much. So it could be the sort of lie that people would probably buy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But the whole lie and the whole repetition, the cycle of things, it's interesting, in the film.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the structure of society before we talk, about how the characters fit within that. If you are just watching the film, but you're an Argentine viewer, what can you infer about this family of our protagonist, the young woman. Who were they? Now we know later in the film it is said that they're one of the
Lavinia family. Yeah, we know, later that they had money, but they are workers now. They have a interesting, and that I thought it was very Buñuel. What they do, this is a family, it's an old mansion in ruins.
Right.
And so it's really a metaphor, for the decadence of some certain bourgeois, families that have lost, their money, and they work sewing dresses for weddings, which is really a metaphor, of the whole film. How important the wedding has been in that family, the non-wedding of the aunt of Aunt Inés, who is, they are trapped. So they are working desperately, and they don't even pay attention to this young woman that comes. The opening scene of the film is very Buñuel. The girl is studying, in a Catholic school, in a convent and the sisters that come with her, they talk about morality. So this is, very ironic, to talk about the decadence of the bourgeoisie and this society that is really struggling, to still have a name, to have a reputation.
Well,
and the reality is different because the father of this young girl has died, but he had left the house, and he had a dwarf as a son outside the marriage, and the dwarf was in the house. They call him the opa. That's So this young girl wants to see how the opa looks. She has no idea that the aunt has been there trapped. So she really is very. The whole mystery and the whole thriller of the story is that the girl comes summer. She has a summer off from school, and so after this opening scene that I thought, oh, this is Buñuel, Pierre Buñuel. She comes into this mansion in ruins. The two women are working, sewing, because they have to finish everything for the wedding, and she hears noises, and she knows that the opa is up there. She hears strange noises in the house, and we don't know. And of course, the suspense. It's very gothic, and we say, "Oh, what is there?" But the opa, we think the opa is there, but the opa is not there. Who is there is the aunt. That's why I think Garcia Lorca enters into the picture. She's been there for 20 years. Yeah. Why has she been there in seclusion in these, these quarters that are, very elegant and decadent? Why has she been there? Because the rich man, who's still alive, in the town, he didn't marry her. He abandoned her after he seduced her, and so her lie was the following: she didn't want anybody to know that she was abandoned by this guy, and she decided to say that she married this guy from Alcatraz, an American guy from Alcatraz, and so she was happily married, and they would get letters. The mailman would get the letters every week, from somebody in prison writing.
Well, and what's interesting is that the word that's been used about the dwarf is equally true, but in a even more damning way, because the aunt says, you hide your shame, you don't exhibit it. And so it gets transferred from the notion of shame about physical deformation that we may not approve of in any, we may not approve of that, but then you say, oh no, it's moved from the physical deformation merely to, you might say, the symbolic order. That is, she's been defamed. Yes. Because she's been rejected within the social hierarchy, and that's worse from their point of view than the physical deformation. They'd rather deflect it to physical deformation than to consider what its social implications are.
Yes, and virginity. I mean, this Beatriz Guido talks always about these things. Virginity. She likes to write about these young women that are coming of age, and they discover sexuality, but in a very repressed society, and where morality, is so important.
Well, and also, I want to say it's a repressed society, unquestionably, but it's also a enormously hypocritical society because, and that this is very important in the film, because the film, again, using the language we would use today, it really gives us a very keen analysis not only of the shame felt by the women and the degree to which they buy into the system,
Yes.
but also of the contradictions and hypocrisy of the patriarchal system that keeps perpetuating
That's right,
itself.
and they are subject to that. They cannot really get out of it.
That's-
That's interesting. For 20 years, this woman has been there. And the guy, who is a rich chaval, he's he's married, he has a lot of money and children, and he races cars, and he's the big Don Juan,
Right.
over there, and he's still young, and so in a way, the movie makes an incredible contrast between the.
But there's also two Argentinas in this in this film that I find very, very interesting. One of those Argentinas is one that is oligarchic, based in agricultural wealth and tremendous wealth that was made by people. The phrase was, of course, in the era of World War I in Paris. The phrase, as you well know, was "riche comme un Argentin," rich like an Argentine.
For la viande, it was the meat.
Because
and
of the meat.
yeah.
But the point is that the ants still live in that oligarchic and conservative world. Also,
But they work like horses.
well, I understand they still buy into the value system because they can't see any way out of it. What's interesting is that we see in the town that there's this other hedonistic, consumer-driven modern world, the world of the teenagers on the little motorcycles,
yes.
of the modern
Yes.
music, of the access to
and they're
Buenos
not very
Aires.
intellectual. That boy that she meets, her friend, he couldn't care less.
Yeah.
About. He was very superficial. In general.
This is books. What are they for? He's
That's right.
It's very
books. Why do you read books? Something like that. And it's very interesting. The commentary of. But
let me
I
just
think
stop-
that
let me
comes
just
from the
stop for one
populist
s-
governments.
Well, let me just stop 1 second. Have to do with that boy, because that boy it's a very, very impressive performance by a young actor.
Yeah.
And many people who are not Argentine would not recognize that this is Leonardo Favio, who is a very distinguished singer, but also used this experience as a young man, as an
Really? I
actor,
didn't know.
to actually observe everything that was going on, and he is one of Argentina's most distinguished film directors. Leonardo Favio. His films have not been so much exported.
No.
No. But in
But
fact,
I heard his name, but he was so young then.
he was so young then. In the 1960s and 70s, he really developed and is thought by many people to be Argentina's greatest filmmaker. His most recent film that was shown in the United States was about the Gatica. The Gatica El Mono, Gatica the monkey, a
Yes.
famous Argentine boxer,
Yes.
and he uses the film as the career of the boxer who did make an alliance with Perón to comment upon the relationship between the working class and its aspirations
see.
and Peronism.
So this was one of the.
It was a key moment
Moment.
in the development, actually, of modern Argentine cinema. That this
He
young
presents
man,
a different aspect of society.
well,
Definitely,
and
yeah.
that's the two Argentinas I'm talking about. That there's this older town that's living in decadence, in the sense that the women
Completely,
can't get out of the mansion,
I know.
and yet
they live in the past.
they live completely in the past, and yet there's there's access to Buenos Aires available, and Buenos Aires represents a kind of really modern European decadence that we would associate with, Francisco Rabal himself in one of his European films, because audiences should also know that our male protagonist, the male seducer, is not an Argentine actor, but a Spanish actor, Francisco Rabal.
Right. It was
Associated
a co-production, with Spain.
Absolutely, but also someone associated with Buñuel and Antonioni for his roles
That's
with
right.
with them. So we have, you know, these two worlds that are struggling with one another. The old world, which is fading.
Yes,
And
and,
a new
and you
world that's-
see also the young woman. I mean, the social, you know, the sexual norms are different in the young woman and this boy, you know, who wants, you know, to make love to her, and so the world is changing, but the structure of the society is very oppressive, you know, with the old world. And what is interesting about the film is that this young woman is sort of condemned, you know, to have the hand in the trap.
Right. No, it is a pattern of
And
repetition because
repetition, you know, is exactly, you know, the same cycle, you know. As a way out of the house, she will fall, you know, into the same pattern.
Exactly, because that's one of the things that I think in the structure of the film, we have, as you've pointed out so well, in the very beginning, we have this mystery structure of going back and
Yes.
looking into the house, finding out what's happening there. Then when there's that initial discovery, we also have the entrance of the male protagonist, the seducer, not the young fellow, but the older. And then we have this break in point of view, and what we've thought the film was going to be about, and she still thinks it's going to be about, is an education that's going to take her somewhere. Well,
Which she wants to discover something. She wants to discover the truth.
and in this film, to discover the truth means, alas, to discover that you're going to follow the same pattern that which you feared.
Yes.
You know, because we know at the end of the film, and when he keeps saying, "I'll take care of you,"
That was really very dramatic, you know, at the end. I mean, I'll take care of you, and you know, it's like the whole thing. It's coming again.
well, and again, that's the thing that she had feared most. The moment that she set off on the discovery is when it's suggested that she will start caring for the person upstairs. It's, oh, well, when I get too tired, Laura will be able to take over. And that's the thing that she fears most, is that relationship of caretaker and cared for. And
yes.
that is where she ends.
She ends exactly the same way that
Right.
and Ines. You know, and
Now, we just have a minute or so left. So there's another film from the same epoch by Francisco Ayala called El Jefe. Would you describe what that film is in just a minute or so and how it contrasts with this? Because we shouldn't take any single film as representing everything of a culture or a moment.
No, but definitely, I mean, they are opposites because Fernando Ayala based his story on David Viñas' El Jefe, and David Viñas, you know, comes from a school of realism, you know, in literature. So, what they are contrasting. They want to talk about the reality, the political reality. Fernando Ayala presents the figure of El Jefe that is, you know, similar to Perón or any dictatorship. So it's a very political thing. And David Viñas, of course, he was very conscious, you know, about social realism. So they're really opposites.
Okay, we're going to have to end there. I'm sorry to have to cut you off, but we end off with this notion, you know, there's a lot of things to be looked at. If you'd like more information about this series or about City Cinematheque, drop us a line. Drop it to City Cinematheque, City University Television, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016. Let me give you that information again. City Cinematheque, City University Television, 365 Fifth Avenue, main floor, New York, New York, 10016. Flora, I'm going to have to rush out of this by thanking you, and you just gave us too much information. That's why I have to rush.
I hope it's never too much.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, great. And I hope that you join us once again here on City Cinematheque. Thanks for tuning in today.